Our Democratic leaders are publicly backing President Biden amid calls for him to step aside. But what would replacing Biden as the presumptive nominee look like? Here's CNN's Tom Foreman.
Primaries have been held. Delegates committed. President Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. Short of a true health crisis, about the only way he loses that slot is if he agrees to step aside. His stumbling debate performance against former President Donald Trump, however, has fueled calls for him to do just that.
On the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
But even then, the process of replacing him would be full of uncertainty. Democrats could work it out at their convention in August, the way political parties used to. Various names would be put forward, and most likely the more than 3,900 delegates from across the country would discuss, debate, and eventually decide on a new candidate. Almost all of them right now are currently pledged to Biden and approved by his campaign. But if they can't agree, if it gets really nasty and grinds on, well, then maybe the additional 700 superdelegates, deep-seated party insiders and elected officials, could be key to settling the matter. They normally can't vote on the first ballot for president if it would change the nomination, but they can vote on subsequent ballots. But that scenario raises questions, too. Would voters who took part in primaries feel pushed aside and alienated from the party if a new nominee was chosen? Would a new choice be able to mount an effective campaign in the roughly 10 weeks from the end of the convention until Election Day? And who would be the choice? There are several big names that could likely be considered, but not until the party decides how it feels about Vice President Kamala Harris. Plenty of Democratic voters and party leaders would see her as the natural heir to the nomination, and if she is not chosen, her disappointed supporters could also become a deep problem for the party in November. For now, Biden's advisors and other top Democrats are pushing back on the whole idea of him dropping out, and according to his team, the president is still looking forward to a rematch with Trump at the next debate in September.
All right, let's talk further about all of this now. Lisa Ram is here. She's the host of NPR's Morning Edition on WABE Radio here in Atlanta. Good to see you.
Good to see you. What a week.
What a week. And what a weekend, because now we are hearing, through our sources that the DNC is having kind of a Zoom call. It was scheduled the last minute, reportedly yesterday. A call today, and then we know that Biden, while he's in the Hamptons right now at various fundraisers, he's also meeting with campaign officials or members of the campaign, re-election campaign. Is this alarming? Is there a correlation with his debate performance, or do you believe this is a rejiggering, something that often happens on a campaign trail?
I think both. Both. It happens naturally, especially this close to a November election. But all of America agrees Thursday night was a debacle for the Biden campaign. And here in Georgia, you know that a major voting bloc is African-American women. So I took it upon myself to ask this morning, what direction should the Biden campaign take now, and what direction should the Trump campaign take now? And they say Biden simply has to solidify confidence again. There was this major stumble. Here we are in June, almost in July, and then we have this September debate coming up. He's going to have to work to solidify and show the Biden of old, if he can. As far as Trump, they say he's just going to have to cut back on the rhetoric, and he's going to have to be a little more authentic at this point moving on and convince the public why a convicted felon is worthy of the presidency.
Okay, we are seeing, or audiences are seeing, authentically Donald Trump. You mentioned solidifying the confidence, or maybe even restoring some confidence for the Biden camp. Is the vice president a valuable tool in which to help do that for Biden?
Vice president is always a valuable tool, and I think Kamala Harris gets, I don't know, the bad end of the stick, because we've never examined Al Gore like this.
Sure, but many critics had been discussing that she was or using the word liability as it relates to Kamala Harris. But then she came out with a very succinct, strong message, kind of course correct, following the debate. And now there are conversations about, oh, wait a minute, maybe she can assist him in a big way right now.
Well, and there was a lot of talk after the debate. If she had been on that podium Thursday night, it would have been a totally different debate. So I think, yes, they need to utilize Kamala Harris a lot more at this point to kind of save the Democratic Party, as a lot of people are saying. And then you have a lot of people stepping up in favor of Biden that I think is helping in these critical hours. You have former President Obama, of course, making that statement, and he holds
Who said
weight.
in that tweet, he said, you know, bad debate nights happen. Trust me, I know, but this election is still a choice between someone who has fought for ordinary folks his entire life and someone who only cares about himself. Is that a main takeaway you think voters are willing to embrace at the directive of the former President Obama?
You know, it's a wait and see. You know, we're just, a few days out of the debate, and a lot of people are saying Biden, who showed up the next day, I believe in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, who was vibrant, who was on message, who was on point. He's going to have to step up the ante at this point. And I think a lot of people are waiting to see if that will happen. Is time running out? I think there is enough time to change course at this point.
About 4 months to go before Election Day. It's been a pretty tumultuous last 48 hours.
Indeed.
Is Biden in trouble?
If you look at the polls, the majority of polls say that he is. And then with all of these meetings happening, you kind of wonder what's really taking place behind closed doors. You know, you have those polls saying that he should be replaced. Well, replaced with who? Is that, you know, Kamala Harris? Who is that? You hear all these names tossed around. And it's almost too late in the game for that. So, you know, at this point, he may be in trouble, but there is time, as I noted, for him to turn the tables and turn it around. So we'll just have to wait and see.
We're in Georgia. You talked about, you've just spoken with a number of, you know, Georgia voters, mostly women, as it pertains to Donald Trump. Was his performance, or should it be considered a victory? He and his camp are saying they feel quite victorious following that debate.
Yeah, like I said, the rhetoric. A lot of people, you know, think he came out stronger. You know, and it began with that walk to the podium. You know, he walked out with a lot more confidence than Biden. So from the beginning, you know, he held the attention of the 51 million viewers that was watching this debate. But the rhetoric, they saw through the rhetoric, and the fact checking, the facts, some of the things that he spewed out was Donald Trump of old that just didn't make sense. And I think a lot of people are seeing through that this time.
How do you see either Biden or Trump treating Georgia differently? Because Georgia became like Florida, you know, Florida. You know, back to the, you know, the days of old. Do you see that Georgia once again could be a very pivotal state? In some corners, still very purple. In some corners, still very red. How do you see Biden and Trump campaigning differently this go round?
Oh my gosh, they're honing in on
state.
Georgia. Recent polls have them neck and neck, and they are here. They're setting up shop, and they're taking it very, very seriously. The Trump camp is they're courting African American male entrepreneurs. They're saying that there's some leeway there, and they think they can gain that vote. The Biden camp is, you know, treating voters like they always have, that every individual is important, but they're here making a difference. And they, too, are courting African-American male business owners as well, with Kamala Harris coming here several times in recent months. So once again, we are on the national spotlight, and for good reason.
All right. I know you remember Tim Russert. Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Now I feel
Georgia.
like it's Georgia.
Absolutely.
All right, Lisa Ram, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it. Great to
as
see you.
always.